All right, welcome to one more OpenTofu office hours. It's just a days away from Christmas and the New Year, and today's a very, very special office hours. So December 19th, and we're going to go through the same format as usual, but have a little bit more discussion than we usually do. So Kuba, what makes this particular one special?
Glad you're asking. Today is finally the day where we've released the release candidate of OpenTofu. So if all goes well now after those months of work, we might actually have the version of OpenTofu on our hands that will, on the 10th of January, become the stable one. So you'll actually be able to finally move your production workloads to OpenTofu with a safe conscience.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a journey, right? I think we issued a blog post here. I'll change the slide to there we go. But it's crazy to think that like just 4 months ago we put out that manifesto, and like we were all hoping that that we would be able to rally everyone around together, and to some extent we did, right? Like we've had an amazing response, got the whole open source community organized. Lots of ups and downs, with some great things with the Linux Foundation, etc. Um, and um, and like there's been lots of challenges throughout the whole process. Kuba, you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges, like the registry, or some of the features like module testing or the system
Sure.
backend, all of that.
Sure. So really, over the last few months, we really why this took so long is that there was a lot of steps that we had to actually do to bootstrap this project, to get this first release out. A lot of steps that we won't have to make again, so we won't have this overhead with future releases. But we had to get all the testing pipelines going, the release pipeline going, actually send up the whole contribution flow, the issue management flow, the biggest one, the registry. We worked a lot on that. And the reason is not because the implementation we have is particularly complicated. No, it's because we tried to do it in a community first fashion. So we exposed this to community being open to RFCs. We waited for RFCs to be submitted. We discussed them in a fairly wide audience, even getting consulting people from different projects, from Homebrew, from other places. So with this, we were actually able to gather around one idea, to gather consensus around one idea that actually in the end ended up being very simple and so far working really, really, really well and being very simple to operate. And those were really the steps that had the biggest overhead and took a while to test to get to be really stable so that we're confident in those and confident that they're ready for prime time, they're ready for the traffic that the OpenTofu registry will get once people actually start properly porting the workloads to it. Yeah, fortunately, we don't have to do that again. So expect faster releases in the future.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things with open source communities, right? It's like it's the camaraderie that you see with what was his name again from Homebrew? Forgot his name.
I'm very bad with names, sorry.
Yeah, for some reason I'm blanking as well. But one of the founders of Homebrew was,
Mike.
yeah, there you go, Mike. Was like super helpful to provide some advice on his experience with Homebrew, and like the coming together communities like that is just heartwarming and super helpful. It's I love it. Um, and obviously lots of other help from other folks in the community, from bug reports to just usage to evangelization, all of that. So I guess I'm kind of skipping ahead to the how to contribute part, but Kuba, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to also add it was incredible to see the author of the client-side encryption RFC work
Yeah.
on it actually who tried to get it in Terraform first, but that didn't got accepted. Then submitted this right when OpenTofu kind of published a fork and kept working on the RFC, on the POC over the months, consulting with various community members, with core team members, so that we actually recently got to a consensus on a single design. We accepted it. We actually kicked it off with a planning meeting, and we will start intense work on that from the beginning of the new year. And we're really looking forward to collaborating with them on that. And we're really looking forward to having this as one of the flagship features in the 1.7 release.
Yep. That's a good segue, but we'll circle back to kind of what's planned for 1.7 a little bit later. It's yeah, back to the kind of the idea of open source communities. Like it takes effort to coordinate everyone to get organized, but then when it all comes together, the velocity is just unparalleled to compared to any other communities, right? Um, kind of skipping back ahead, like I guess this is already out of date. There's when I made the slides, yeah, wait,
It is.
yeah, it's a lot more than this now, but like it's tens of thousands of stars, committers all around the world, tons of PRs being merged at a high rate. Kuba, do you have more recent numbers or?
I mean, I can tell you that in total we have over 1,000 pull requests and issues on the repository already. So there's actually quite a lot. The number of GitHub stars is, I believe, actually fairly up to date. Where you have it, it's almost 17,000 now. But yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's and then we've also had I think yeah, there's all sorts of organizations as well um, that are joining in the effort, and
Yeah.
it's awesome.
And, and
Um,
and speaking of, sorry if you don't mind.
yeah, Christian, go for it.
And speaking of community, it's been incredible to see people just coming out of the woodwork to help out with all sorts of interesting issues. Even just getting the 1.6 release out, helping with documentation, helping with small features, bug fixes, and the immense amount of excitement that exists in those issues of people saying, hey, I'd love to help with this. Hey, this is something that I've really wanted to see for a while. I'm so glad that there's people who are excited about the same stuff that I am. Let's work together. It's been wonderful to see, and I can't wait for 1.7.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's kind of one of the things that I guess, like, I guess it's kind of like and it ends up being great for the community because now there's a truly kind of not just open source, but open development, open process for all of that. And sure, it takes effort, and Kuba is one of the greatest for getting all of this organized and getting everyone rowing in the same direction. But yeah, we're excited to see the project take off like this. Um, so 2 weeks ago, I was in Tokyo presenting at OSS Tokyo and talking a little bit about OpenTofu. And we got a number of really interesting questions from the community, and I was thinking that I could just relay them here. And then Kuba, if you don't mind, you can take a stab at answering them. Oh, Kuba, go ahead.
Before you say this, I just wanted to add one more thing, really, apropos the how to contribute part. One thing that is quite important is that finally, so we've had a lot of those frozen until stable release labels. We will actually be starting to handling those now. So with the release candidate out of the way, we broke off the 1.6 branch to a different branch of code where it's frozen and will just receive bug fixes and backports of minor improvements. And the main branch is now actually targeting 1.7. That means we can finally start accepting pull request pull requests with improvements. There's already multiple of those that have been waiting to be merged, and we'll also finally start accepting issues, which will also open more room to contribute, because right now, with us really working our way to the stable release, there's not been much opportunity to contribute. There was the label, good to pick up issues, and occasionally there were some issues, but they very quickly were picked up, actually insanely quickly, and very quickly contributed. So now we'll be opening more issues up like that to contribution. So keep your eyes on the issue tracker. Stuff will open up. There will be more opportunities to contribute from now on.
Yep. Awesome. So, all right. So, I'm going to relay a little bit some of the questions that we had 2 weeks ago, and then we can just kind of discuss some of our approaches there. And then if there's any additional questions from folks in the audience, we can take those. But so one of the questions that we got, and I do think we kind of want to clarify this a little bit, but does OpenTofu need to fork every provider?
No. So the way it works is that OpenTofu is fully compatible with the Terraform provider protocol, and we aim to keep it that way. That means you author your provider, you author it on GitHub the way you've been authoring them until now for the Terraform registry, and you can submit it to both the Terraform registry and the OpenTofu registry, and it'll just keep working with both. You don't have to do any additional action other than submitting to the OpenTofu registry. Existing providers, most of them at least, we've tried to cover it fairly well, have been imported to the registry. So the providers you already use should be available. We're monitoring on our registry 404s to make sure that nothing is missing. But for the last, I think, 2 weeks already, we haven't seen any 404s. So we're pretty confident that we've got most of them covered.
So as a provider author, there's no additional work, right?
Yeah, if you author a new provider, you have to submit that. And we've actually already had a person submit their provider by their Linux containers project. They have a new provider. They've submitted it to the OpenTofu registry. So we were very happy to see that.
Go ahead, Christian.
I was just going to say it's also worth noting that if you look in the OpenTofu org, you'll see forks of existing Terraform providers. Those exist primarily for maintaining build and release assets. Those are not actual forks of the code. That is not a divergent system there. It's mostly for a mirroring of artifacts and dealing with some of those edge cases.
Yep, perfect. And then the last kind of follow-up question that we got on that specific topic is, are there any efforts underway on making a standard or making sure that HashiCorp doesn't do something that makes some providers incompatible in the future?
Nothing public yet. Let me frame it that way.
All right. All right. The second question we had, or second set of questions that we had, is how can OpenTofu guarantee compatibility in the long term, in kind of with Terraform versions 1.7 and subsequent?
Sure. So we're not planning for 100% compatibility. The way we go about it is we evaluate features included in new Terraform versions, like any feature request the community could make. So the reason is that as we've said many times, we're a community-driven project with a transparent issue processing process. So we don't want Terraform to basically have a way to fully sidestep this process and just, impact the OpenTofu roadmap. Of course, many features they do make totally sense and will try to be compatible to her. But there are also things we will omit in practice. If you feel like something that we've omitted is important to you in those, just submit an issue and we'll be happy to take a look at that. We'll be happy to introduce that. We'll generally be doing calls on a case-by-case basis here. We are, however, a separate project and don't mean to basically replicate Terraform on a one-on-one basis. That is totally not what we're going for. OpenTofu is aiming to have its own feature set, its own selling point features in 1.7, 1.8. There's a lot of things we are playing with, we're experimenting with, we're POCing, we're planning a lot of big things that people have been asking for many years now, and it looks like we might knock out a couple of them fairly quickly.
And so in that vein of additional features, that makes that makes moving from OpenTofu to Terraform, for whatever reason, not that I would ever suggest anybody do that, but that would make migrating back more difficult, right?
Yes. So if you wanted for you to be easy to migrate back from OpenTofu to Terraform, if that is something you'd like to do, you will have to make sure to basically constrain yourself to the features that Terraform supports. In practice, some of the features we'll be introducing will be more on the infrastructure level in a sense. They will be integrations, the way you can hook additional things into OpenTofu, the way, for example, state encryption works. Those don't really impact the DSL, the language of OpenTofu, heavily. So in a sense, your configs will be fairly reusable. There's not much you'll have to change there if you're moving back, even if you use all the OpenTofu features. But there might be some migration. For example, Terraform will probably, I don't know, they haven't been planning to support, they haven't been developing state encryption until now, or introducing it. So if they don't introduce it, then and not in a compatible way, if they do that, obviously if you use client-side state encryption, you'll have to turn that off. But those are all things that are simple to do. It's disabling the encryption and just using a raw state backend. Yeah, but you will have to keep that in mind if you want to migrate back. In practice, even if you dive a lot into OpenTofu specific features, even if we introduce something that impacts the DSL, usually you should have a pretty easy path to migrate back by making a few changes.
Yep. So on that same topic, then, what are some of the Kuba, actually, what would you say are like the top 3 reasons to use OpenTofu, and start the process of migrating to OpenTofu?
So really, open source and being community driven is the main flagship feature. But other than that, it's so really what open source brings with it is not only the community support and, well, a lot of development that we're expecting here that is not guided by a single company, but generally by what the community needs. But it's also competition. I think this is really important, that in a sense, TF, to shortcut it this way for both, OpenTofu and Terraform, the language kind of became the bedrock of their infrastructure and cloud layer, cloud ecosystem. A lot of companies are using, are provisioning infrastructure using Terraform, so and they're relying on it, and it's really nice when you can treat this as a standard that is supported by many third-party tools, both non-commercial and commercial, across the ecosystem, because then you can always switch providers. You can choose them based on the merit. You can choose them based on whether the cost basis makes sense for you. And I think that is really valuable. So it's not, in a sense, a monopolized ecosystem where you just have one provider. That is really the value of such collaborative, driven by multiple companies, projects and open source projects, basically, that they generally have a lot of competition that you, as a user of that tooling, only benefit from.
Yeah, I fully agree, and like it's you're not just choosing a product, right? You're choosing an ecosystem where dozens, if not hundreds, of companies are competing to to provide you with value for your special use case, or your organization's use cases, and choosing an ecosystem is an important decision, and one that's very competitive, and where everyone's working hard to provide you value is a good bet. Another question that we got was, are there any big organizations backing or helping OpenTofu in any capacity?
I mean, I don't know what big means.
Fair enough.
I mean, we have a couple of companies backing OpenTofu. You can check the list of supporters on the website. Whether that is big or not, I suppose is up to you.
Yeah, I also think that like kind of maybe the question behind the question is like a question on the longevity of the project, and the kind of the redundancy, or of like, it's not just one organization, right? So maybe you can speak a little bit to the long-term longevity of the project.
Yeah, of course. Well, we have multiple companies that have already pledged a lot of engineering time. In practice, most of them, I believe, pledged for 5 years ahead. Basically, declared they'll be supporting OpenTofu for 5 years ahead. And for each of those companies, OpenTofu is like a core project that is core to the value they're offering. So really, I'm not too worried about losing steam here. But importantly, a very important part here is, with open source that, well, is actually using an open source license, you always have and can exercise the right to fork. So if something happens to OpenTofu and you're using OpenTofu, you can always do open tofu. No, just kidding. But, point is that with OpenTofu, there's a very good governance model with the Linux Foundation backing it. So the license will stay the same, and in practice, that means that whenever you think you don't like the direction, you can either get involved. You can also start supporting OpenTofu as a company. If OpenTofu is important for you, you can start supporting OpenTofu as an individual, or if you as a group of companies think OpenTofu is not going in the right direction, you can always fork it because it is open source, and that is your right.
The next question is kind of an interesting one, because it's not a question that I had expected to be asked. But what's the partnership like between OpenTofu and HashiCorp?
Partnership.
That is the question verbatim.
It's still in the realm of hopes and dreams. However, those hopes and dreams are still alive. So fingers crossed, it'll come to it. A steering committee seat is surely open for them.
Yeah, and I'll add to that that we would be thrilled to welcome HashiCorp into OpenTofu at any time. We're immensely grateful for all of the work that they've done to date, or we're still hopeful that in the future that they'll join us. Also immensely, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Mitchell has also announced that he has left HashiCorp. So also very grateful for all his work. Kuba, go ahead.
Yeah, also, first, yes, very grateful for that. But I also wanted to add, in a sense, because like there's a lot of open source libraries, many of them authored by HashiCorp that both Terraform and OpenTofu are relying upon. This is also something where, in a sense, we're effectively collaborating, where we were also submitting fixes. So if we see a fix in such a shared library, we submit it and they accept it. It's not like that is not happening, in a sense.
Yeah, there's no formal partnership, but there's still collaboration, and if and your example is a great example of such collaboration. All right, the two other questions are kind of much easier than that one. Where does the OpenTofu name come from? I guess it's now that we have a release candidate out, it's a good time to elaborate a little bit further on that.
Well, we were looking for something that plays well with TF.
Yep.
So in practice, we tried many different names. We had a nice sheet where we are adding names in the core team. So we probably went through over 100 names.
Yeah,
It was a public issue.
voting.
People were going through names. We've gone through many of them, and interestingly, in a completely non-related fashion, in multiple places, the same name has spun up, which is tofu, which plays very well with TF. And in a completely separately, it spun up in multiple places. People liked it in multiple places. We did add the open to make it easier to Google, to make it more sound like a tech project, actually, and not just tofu, which probably wouldn't be great to Google. And with that, OpenTofu was born. Yeah, the name.
Yep, and importantly, we were able to trademark OpenTofu in every, the Linux Foundation was able to trademark that in almost every jurisdiction. So it's that's also an important element of choosing the name. All right, last question that we got from Tokyo. What are the plans to make OpenTofu better than Terraform? I feel like you kind of answered that already, but maybe
I can dive a
just
bit deeper into that. Sure. So first I mentioned client-side state encryption. That is one thing that we're looking for, and that is supposed to be the flagship feature of 1.7, and we will most likely wait with 1.7 until we can release it with the client-side state encryption. However, I actually believe we'll get to it fairly quickly. However, there's a few other things we're looking at. First of all, there's a lot of issues and minor things we will most likely be introducing: the pull requests, adding new functions, improving the performance, stuff like that. However, other than that, there are a couple major things that we're looking at. We haven't yet decided to prioritize, but we're vaguely playing with. One of them is we've seen multiple proposals to add new state backends to OpenTofu. And generally, we'd like to keep the core of OpenTofu lean, but there is obvious value in adding more state backends. Like the core value of OpenTofu is integrating with a lot of ecosystems, with a lot of platforms, etc. So what we would like to do actually is to introduce backends as plugins, so that any company, any project can add support for their storage layer, for whatever they offer as a state backend, like providers. So anybody can author them. It's completely decoupled from the core of OpenTofu. So that is one direction we would like to take and we would like to explore, and we hope to deliver at some point. Another direction is that's been asked for ages, is basically making it possible to parameterize backends, providers, and module configs much more. Christian has actually been working on it, so maybe you want to tell a bit what you've been exploring there.
Yeah, Christian, go for it.
Sure. I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm still in the poking through the code and seeing what different paradigms might work. But there's been a large number of issues that were originally filed against Terraform that people are starting to talk about in different ways now in Tofu. And hopefully, I'm hoping before the end of the year having a RFC set up so that as we as the community can start taking a look at a couple different proposals of adding some of these features that have been asked for a very long time, that people have either been building tools to work around or just suffering with these massive configurations that are very hard to update. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this particular issue is because the last corporation I worked for, which I'm going to guess a lot of you are familiar with this, having a large number of modules being pulled in and having to keep them in sync, having to update versions all over the place, having common pieces that you really wish you could reuse and you can't. So I'm hoping to spend a lot of time putting together the proposal for the end of the year and getting community feedback and starting to build out some features that will really help managing some of these complex problems that have kind of fallen on deaf ears in the past.
Yeah,
I guess we went through a little bit quick there, but Christian, do you think this is could you introduce yourself to the community for folks that are joining in?
Sure. My name is Christian. You can really only find me online as Cam72Cam. That's my GitHub username. Worked at a variety of places in the past, and for the past 2 or so months, I've been working on OpenTofu, sponsored by Spacelift. And it's been an absolutely amazing experience. I've always loved working on open source projects, and getting to do it full time and with such an amazing community has been a dream.
Yep. Thanks. Kuba, you are about to say something? Oh, and Christian, glad to have you here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that on top of what Christian has been saying, maybe this will be a way to get things like, for each on provider configurations, a list of AWS regions and then doing a for each on that. I'm not saying that something will reach, but it's something that's a possible extension of what we're exploring here, and a possible future feature that might be enabled by it. And those are all things that people like, whenever you see this, there's a very common Reddit thread that, on the Terraform Reddit, a thread like this is posted basically every couple of weeks. What would you like to get added to Terraform? And one of the top voted issues is always this, basically, doing for eaches on regions, parameterizing your providers, and all those things are things we could try addressing with that. So, yeah.
That was the last question that we got from Tokyo. So now, kind of opening it up, is there anybody in the audience here that's got a question for any of us? And going once, going twice. Well, I made these extra logos 2 weeks ago, so I'm just gonna reuse them here. Merry Christmas, everyone! Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining the community and caring about open source projects. Happy New Year as well. And we're going to, there's, I think January 10th is the next date to look forward to. Kuba, any last words on that?
No, I mean, keep tuned for the 10th of January. That is the latest release for the OpenTofu stable release, and that will be the moment, the prime time to actually bring OpenTofu in production, to migrate to it, to move to it. That will be the time.
Yep. So it's gonna lots of stuff to look forward to. Everyone, thank you so much for. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Everyone, thanks a lot for dialing in, tuning in, and we will see all of you in the Slack community. Take good care.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.